What if the Jedi High Council was literally high? What would have happened then? So, in this alternate timeline, the Jedi Order had evolved into the galaxy's most powerful criminal enterprise, maintaining an iron grip on the spice trade through ruthless tactics and political manipulation. The Jedi Council, composed of high-ranking crime lords, operated under the guise of peacekeepers while controlling vast distribution networks across the galaxy. Even the revered Master Yoda served as Grand Gangster of the cartel while under house arrest for extensive welfare fraud. Their dominance, however, faced its greatest challenge when their expansion plans were unexpectedly halted. The crisis ignited when Chancellor Palpatine delayed the Jedi cartel's crucial operation on Kashyyyk. This operation involved the orbital bombardment of key Wookiee settlements to eliminate sections of the indigenous population and establish extensive Lunaweed plantations, all under the pretense of clearing separatist activity. This direct interference with their operations proved to be the final straw, prompting the Council to order Palpatine's elimination. Their initial plan relied on manipulating Anakin Skywalker, who still trusted the Chancellor as a friend and mentor, but fate had other designs for the cartel. The cartel's scheme derailed during an intimate conversation between Anakin and Senator Padme Amidala. After Padme joked about love blinding him, Anakin discovered that it literally had, diagnosed with conversion disorder, where his overwhelming feelings of love physically disrupted his neural pathways, rendering him blind. With their unwitting asset lying unconscious under heavy sedation at the Grand Republic Medical Facility, the Council's plans seemed in jeopardy until an unexpected opportunity presented itself. This opportunity emerged through their ongoing conflict with Darth Maul, whose Mandalorian-based operation produced blue spice of unprecedented purity at 99.6%. Under pressure from persistent Jedi harassment, Maul acquiesced to negotiations after being confronted by Ahsoka Tano, the Jedi cartel's formidable child soldier. During these negotiations, Maul revealed a shocking truth that changed everything. Chancellor Palpatine was operating in secret as the Sith Spice Lord Darth Sidious, orchestrating a complex scheme to seize control of the galactic narcotics market. As proof, Maul provided damning footage showing both him and Sidious conducting market research on Endor, which consisted of getting Ewoks high on spice and watching the primitives attempt to devour each other. This revelation demanded immediate action. Master Yoda, despite his active ankle monitors and house arrest status, led a contingent of council members, including Mace Windu, Kit Fisto, and Obi-Wan Kenobi as they strode into the Chancellor's office. And that is where we pick up this story. Let's begin. The council members strode into Palpatine's office, their robes billowing dramatically despite the complete lack of wind. Yoda entered first, using the Force to throw 2 Senate guards against the wall, their bodies crumpling to the floor. The Supreme Chancellor slowly turned his chair toward them. "I hear a new spice empire you have, Supreme Chancellor. Or should I call you Supreme Gangster?" Yoda questioned.
"Master Yoda, you broke house arrest,"
Palpatine replied smoothly.
"Surprised? Your former apprentice ratted you out, he has, Sidious,"
Yoda said, pulling out a small holoprojector.
"Recorded testimony, we have."
He activated the device, and the recording from Endor began playing. A heavily intoxicated Palpatine and Maul, cackling as spice-addled Ewoks devoured each other. Palpatine's face tightened almost imperceptibly as his past self continued giggling at his primitive market research. He remembered that day on Endor. It was when he'd granted that womp rat Maul the rank of Darth, the first and last time Palpatine had ever been high. "Over, your operations are," the Grand Gangster of the Jedi cartel stated. "Your arrogance blinds you, Master Yoda," Palpatine sneered. Wish for blindness I do," Yoda retorted, his ancient eyes narrowing with disgust. "Every time your face I must look upon, curse the Force for giving me sight, I do." The ancient gangster's 2 ankle monitors were blinking red as he stepped forward. "End your wretched existence, and your operations both. We will." "Are you threatening me, Gangster Jedi?" Palpatine's voice carried a dangerous edge. "A threat implies having leverage to force compliance," Mace replied coldly. "We simply require your death. The cartel has already decided your fate." Palpatine rose slowly from his chair. "I am the cartel." "Any man who must say, 'I am the cartel,' is no true cartel," Yoda declared sagely. Rage twisted Palpatine's features. With a calculating ice-cold screech, he ignited his red lightsaber and leaped over his desk. The cartel council members ignited their sabers in response. But everyone froze mid-stance. Both parties stood there, sabers pointed vaguely in the right direction, but no one dared move the humming blades. Truth was, none of them actually knew how to fight with these things. The Jedi mostly just ignited them to intimidate local merchants who were late on protection payments. Palpatine had never learned proper saber combat either. His master Plagueis had been a skilled duelist in his youth, but by the time he took Palpatine as an apprentice, decades of Corellian whiskey had left him with such severe hand tremors he couldn't demonstrate any techniques. Palpatine had even fooled Maul into thinking lightsaber combat was just about spinning it really fast, calling it a good trick. A deception that ultimately led to Maul's bisection during some bizarre duel with a spice-addled Qui-Gon at the Theed Spice Refinery. Suffice to say, the sacred weapons had devolved into nothing more than expensive intimidation tools and cigar lighters. Palpatine's hands trembled slightly as he held his saber out, while the council members kept shooting nervous glances at each other's blades. "It is obvious this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the lightsaber," Palpatine declared, his red blade trembling. "Perhaps we should observe the ancient traditions," he said. "You refer to the ancient Spice Lord tradition of armed conflict." Mace nodded solemnly. "Yes, Master Windu, I propose we follow the rite of blaster combat," Sidious declared. "As all true Spice Lords know, whether Jedi or Sith, it must be observed in matters such as these." A series of grave nods rippled through the chamber. Jedi and Sith alike exchanged knowing looks, centuries of tradition overwhelming even their murderous intentions. The council members began arranging themselves, and Palpatine, understanding the gravity of tradition, took his place among them. Together they formed a perfect circle in the center of the office, ancient enemies united momentarily by the sacred customs of the spice trade. One by one, they deactivated their lightsabers, the blades disappearing with almost audible relief. The weapons were placed on the ground with exaggerated care, each participant making sure to lay their saber pointing counterclockwise, as tradition demanded. 10 hands reached slowly into their robes. In perfect unison, they withdrew their blasters, each one a custom-made status symbol as much as a weapon. Palpatine's gleamed with gold inlay, while the council members' weapons bore the ancient marks of their respective spice territories. They raised their weapons together, forming a tableau that would have made any Outer Rim crime lord proud. The last rays of Coruscant's sun caught the polished metal of their blasters, casting dramatic shadows across their faces. 10. Mace began the sacred count. As tradition dictated, all participants were required to maintain their circular formation until the count of 7, giving each warrior time to contemplate their next actions. 9. The word echoed through the chamber. Fingers tightened on ornate triggers. 8. Came the continuing count. Eyes darted around the circle, each participant marking their intended cover. 7. At this signal, as prescribed by the ancient customs, the circle could be broken. With practiced grace, all 10 figures began their ceremonial withdrawal. Palpatine glided backward toward the statue of Sistros Nevet, one of the sages of Duarty, his golden inlaid blaster never wavering. Kit Fisto and Saisi Teen rolled smoothly behind overturned chairs, while Plo Koon and Shak Ti took position behind massive columns. Ki-Adi-Mundi and Agent Kolar ducked behind the corridor entrance, as Yoda and Obi-Wan claimed the cover of Palpatine's massive desk. Mace continued the count from behind an ancient Sith artifact display. 6. The air crackled with anticipation. 5. Robes settled into final positions. 4. The sunset painted the office in blood-red hues. 3. Each participant checked their blaster's charge one final time. 2. Hearts pounded in perfect synchronization. 1. The office erupted into a storm of plasma bolts. Palpatine dove sideways behind Sistros Nevet in a move that would have made a Naboo action holostar proud, his golden blaster spitting fire. Kit Fisto went down first, his signature smile still on his face as multiple bolts caught him mid-roll. Saisi Teen followed moments later, his horns clicking against the marble floor. A precisely aimed shot from Palpatine tore through Plo Koon's breathing apparatus, the plasma bolt carrying enough energy to continue its deadly path and catch Shak Ti in the chest. She sprawled behind a column, grievously wounded but still breathing, the bolt's power diminished by its first target. Agent Kolar and Ki-Adi-Mundi fell in quick succession, their shots going wild as Palpatine demonstrated why he'd earned the title of Supreme Gangster. But even as chaos reigned, Master Yoda sat in perfect stillness behind his cover, his ankle monitor beeping steadily. In that moment of clarity, Maul's words echoed in his ancient mind. "Unlike the rest of you addicts, Sidious doesn't get high on his own supply." A slight smile crossed the Grand Gangster's weathered face. With practiced calm that would have impressed a Coruscant hitman, Yoda reached into his robes and withdrew a small pouch of unrefined spice, his emergency stash. The ancient crime lord's ankle monitors cast eerie shadows as he hurled the pouch into the air. Time seemed to slow as his precise shot connected, releasing a cloud of pure, uncut spice throughout the chamber. Behind the statue of Sistros Nevet, Palpatine was already formulating his next series of kills, calculating trajectories that would eliminate the remaining cartel members in a precise sequence. But the heated spice particles were already infiltrating his sanctuary, the fine powder flowing around the statue's edges like invisible tendrils. With each breath, microscopic crystals of the galaxy's purest narcotic worked their way into his system, beginning their inexorable assault on his legendary self-control. The Supreme Gangster's first missed shot was so uncharacteristic that even he paused in surprise. His second shot went wide by a margin that would have embarrassed a rookie Senate guard. The crystalline clarity that had made him such a feared opponent began to dissolve, replaced by an unsettling warmth that had nothing to do with combat efficiency. But then Yoda's next shot struck the base of Sistros Nevet. The massive statue began to tilt, and Palpatine's situation became truly dire. The Force had always responded to his fury, his calculated rage transforming his ancient frame into a weapon of terrible power. But the spice was methodically dismantling that rage, replacing it with an alien sense of calm that he had spent decades avoiding. His face contorted with strain as he tried to hold the statue up with the Force, while simultaneously defending against the plasma bolts. But his movements had lost their serpentine grace. No acrobatic flips or spins were possible now. The spice had stripped away the rage that had always fueled his connection to the dark side, leaving him with only his natural strength. The strength of an elderly bureaucrat trying to hold up tons of bronzium-coated neuranium. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his powers continued to fade. His once precise battle calculations dissolved into a haze of disjointed thoughts. The golden blaster in his trembling hands might as well have been firing in random directions. The statue tilted further, and Palpatine found himself trapped between physics and chemistry. His force powers diminishing with each calming breath of spice-laden air, his physical frame inadequate for the task without that dark side enhancement. Only then did the full brilliance of Yoda's strategy become clear. Palpatine had always lived by that ancient rule, don't get high on your own supply. Years of sampling their own product had given the Jedi near-legendary tolerance levels, but Palpatine, in his rigid adherence to that criminal maxim, had no such protection. In maintaining his edge through abstinence, he'd created his own greatest vulnerability. Something had to give. His focus finally wavered completely, the plasma bolts from Mace and Obi-Wan finding their mark just as his weakened force grip on the statue failed. The massive sculpture crashed down, pinning the Supreme Gangster beneath its weight, defeated not by superior firepower or force ability, but by the very sobriety that had kept him sharp for so long. Yoda hobbled forward. At an end, your rule is, he declared solemnly, and not short enough it was. Palpatine's bloodied lips curved into a final smile. In death, I still win. His trembling hand found his data watch. The Jedi cartel falls, even if my dream of a Sith spice empire dies with me. With his last strength, he pressed a button, activating a pre-recorded hologram message that instantly transmitted across the galaxy. Execute Order 66. Through the Force, Yoda sensed thousands of clone troopers suddenly shifting allegiance, their loyalty programming activating. The clone forces who had been running protection rackets, managing distribution networks, and enforcing cartel territories for the Jedi were now turning against them. In that moment, Yoda realized that, with his death, Palpatine had ensured the destruction of both criminal empires. The Jedi cartel would be arrested, and Palpatine's plans for a Sith spice empire would die with him. "Oh shit," Yoda said. As Palpatine's final breath escaped him, his lips still frozen in that vengeful smile, the four surviving council members, Mace, Obi-Wan, a grievously wounded Shaq T, and ankle-monitored Yoda, could only watch as police speeders began converging on the temple in the distance. In his final act as Supreme Gangster, Palpatine had ensured that if he couldn't have the galaxy's spice trade, no one would. Across the galaxy, the great betrayal unfolded in dramatic slow motion, accompanied by a swelling orchestral score. In the temple's sacred hydroponics chamber, Master Sindralig was teaching Padawans the ancient art of lunoweed cultivation. Remember, learners, you must feel the force flow through the irrigation system. His words were cut short as clone troopers burst through the door. His final act was to destroy the crop ledgers as tear gas filled the room. On Felucia, Aayla Secura was deep in negotiations with Gotham representatives in a mushroom-themed nightclub when her clone commanders drew their weapons. The datapad displaying her meticulously crafted Shell Corporation network and off-world banking arrangements clattered to the floor, its screen still showing a complex flowchart of numbered accounts across 17 systems. On Kashyyyk, the clone commanders who had been surveying potential orbital bombardment sites for the Council's planned renovation of the planet suddenly began arresting their Jedi generals. The detailed plans for clearing out the worthless Wookiee settlements to make room for new Luna weed plantations were seized as evidence. Deep in the temple's underground counting room, elderly Master Jocasta Nu had barricaded herself inside the archives, frantically trying to delete generations of financial records. On her security feeds, she watched clone accountants methodically approaching the vault, documenting everything as they came. All this knowledge must be destroyed, she cried, as she raced to wipe databanks containing detailed money laundering techniques and the sacred texts of tax evasion. On her desk, an arsenal of ceremonial blasters and ancient Jedi weapons lay ready, while mountains of unrefined spice covered the ancient scrolls of fraudulent accounting. Watching the clone breach team beginning their work on the reinforced doors, the revered librarian made her decision. With mechanical precision, she began arranging the crystalline powder into precise lines, the kind of organization you'd expect from the temple's head archivist. Then, with the same meticulousness she applied to cataloging tax havens, she proceeded to inhale an amount that would have killed any normal being. As the vault doors finally gave way, she snapped up from her desk like a spice-crazed crate dragon emerging from its den. Her typically pristine bun now disheveled, spice coating her normally immaculate robes, she hefted the massive archive defense cannon. "You want to take my archives?" she snarled, watching the wave of white armored figures pour through the breach. The sacred knowledge of institutional tax fraud, the ancient wisdom of untraceable transactions. Her eyes blazed with chemical enhancement as she shouldered the enormous weapon. "Say hello to my little apprentice," she yelled. What followed was the stuff of law enforcement legend. The spice-enhanced librarian unleashed hell, her massive archive defense cannon roaring fire while she screamed about proper documentation of illicit financial flows. She mowed down waves of clone troopers, all while correcting their mishandling of evidence related to the Order's pyramid schemes and insurance scams. In the end, it took a synchronized stun blast from an entire squad, while she was alphabetizing records of money laundering through hut space, even mid-firefight, to finally bring down the archive's most feared record keeper. As they led the unconscious librarian away, Mandalorian blue still coating her face, even the clone commanders had to admire her dedication to both violent resistance and proper filing of fraudulent financial documents. A Coruscant Security Force evidence holovid documented the temple's elaborate distribution network being dismantled, piece by piece. The ancient ceremonial scales used to measure Force-sensitive materials were carefully photographed and bagged, while the infamous Circle of Meditation in the Council Chamber was revealed as an elaborate spice-cutting facility. Through it all, an emotional score played as security footage captured Jedi after Jedi being led away in restraints, their expressions somehow conveying noble sacrifice rather than being caught red-handed. Even as evidence of their vast criminal enterprise was documented, the scene played like the fall of legendary peacekeepers rather than the galaxy's largest organized crime bust. Anakin's eyes fluttered open, vision slowly returning after 2 days of darkness. The first thing he saw was Padme's face swimming into focus, her eyes brimming with tears of joy. "Anakin, can you see me?" She grabbed his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "The medical droid said you would, but I've been so worried," and she was practically buzzing with excitement, words tumbling out faster than she could organize them. "I can see you," he confirmed, a slow smile spreading across his face. What happened exactly? You don't remember?" Padme's eyes somehow got even more intense. "We were talking about the baby, about going to the lake country, and then, honey, you literally went blind from loving me too much. The medical droids called it conversion disorder. Your feelings were so intense, they actually disrupted your neural pathways." She squeezed his hand tighter. "Do you have any idea what that means? How special that is?" "I remember getting dizzy, everything going dark." He blinked a few times, still adjusting to sight. "Did I really poke your ears?" he asked, remembering fragments of doing just that, while sedated in the med center. "Yes, you did. Multiple times." She laughed, wiping away happy tears. "You were quite concerned about them under sedation. It was adorable." It was then that Anakin began to take in his surroundings. His smile turned to confusion. This isn't the medical facility." His eyes wandered over the ornate architecture, the sunlight streaming through familiar villa windows. "We're on Naboo?" "Of course we're on Naboo," Padme exclaimed, still holding his hand against her face. "You literally went blind From loving me too much. Did you think I was going to let some corporate medical facility handle your recovery? Besides, after everything that happened with the Jedi cartel... The Jedi... Anakin cut in. Something's wrong. I felt disturbances. Padme, did something happen? Padme hesitated. Yeah, actually. Now how best to explain this to you? Anakin looked at her, seeking answers. So, Anakin, you remember the Wookiee orbital bombardment plans, right? She began.